My name is Ethan, I am 32 years old, and the last few years of my life have seemed pretty normal. I would wake up early in the morning, feed our two cats first thing in the morning, then drive to the office where I work to protect data and networks from cyber attacks, and then come home to my wife in the evening. Lauren and I have been married for 6 years. Our life was routine. Work, home, the occasional movie on the weekends, a vacation once a year. Nothing special, but I thought that was the case for many people, and that we were happy. Lauren is my age, 30. She is a former dancer and a certified fitness trainer. She has always been very energetic, goal-oriented, the complete opposite of my calm nature, but we complement each other well. A few years ago, she had a dream to open her own fitness studio. At first, I treated it as an abstract desire that could remain a dream. But a year ago, she became serious about this idea. She began collecting information, attending seminars for entrepreneurs, and looking at renting premises. I saw how important it was for her, and I decided to support my wife. We started discussing plans to open a studio. It turned out that to start a business, we needed money, a lot of it. A space, renovations, equipment, staff salaries for at least the first few months, advertising. We didn't have much savings. By that time, we were paying off a mortgage on our house in a quiet suburb of Denver, and we had one car between us. A small portion of my income went to paying off Lauren's student loan, which she had taken out before the marriage. It was a bit tight financially, but bearable. To help Lauren realize her dream, we decided to take out a bank loan for the business. More precisely, the loan was issued in my name because my credit history and income were better. I knew I was taking a risk, but at the time it seemed worth it. My wife would be happy, and her studio would eventually start bringing in income. At a family meeting, that is, in the kitchen over a cup of coffee, we discussed all the details. The loan amount was significant, about $80,000. I was nervous signing the papers at the bank, but Lauren was beaming with joy, and that was the main thing for me. Once the money arrived, a whirlwind of work began. We rented a space in the city center, not very big, but bright, with high ceilings. I helped as much as I could. In the evenings after work, I painted the walls with my wife, assembled the exercise machines that had been brought. We saved on everything, trying to stay within the budget. Instead of hiring expensive designers, I drew the logo for the studio myself and made a simple website. My experience as an IT specialist helped me with this. Lauren was in charge of the training program, hired instructors, and an administrator for the reception. It was a tense period, but I felt like I was part of something important for both of us. During these months, Lauren and I spent less time together in a romantic sense. Everything revolved around her project. There were evenings when she was in the city late, resolving issues with suppliers or organizing advertising campaigns. I understood this. A new business requires a huge return, and my concern was to provide for the rear to continue to work well at my main job so that we could pay off the loan. Sometimes I joked that during the day I caught hackers, and at night I turned into a handyman in a fitness studio. Our family life seemed to be on pause, but I hoped it was temporary. That the studio would open, the flow of clients would improve, and we would be able to spend our evenings more quietly again, maybe even train together there, in her gym. I was proud of Lauren. Not every dream is so persistently realized. I thought it would bring us closer as a couple because we were overcoming difficulties together. The studio opened 3 months after the start of preparation. I remember the opening day clearly. Balloons at the entrance, music, the first visitors, whom we invited with a free trial workout. The room itself looked modest, but very cozy. It still smelled of fresh paint. Large mirrors were fixed along the perimeter. Rows of new mats and dumbbells were neatly arranged. Lauren and I put our souls into this space, and on that day we felt that all the difficulties were not in vain. The first weeks after the launch were on the rise. Clients really came. Both advertising and word of mouth helped. Many of Lauren's friends from the fitness community supported her. The studio was open from morning until evening. Yoga, strength classes, dance, fitness. Lauren spent almost all her time in the studio, often leading classes herself. I also dropped by in the evenings either to fix something or to help with accounting, which I understood better than she did. However, the fairy tale mood soon gave way to routine and the first worries. After a couple of months of euphoria, it became clear that there were fewer regular customers than we had hoped for. Some came for a one-time promotional rate and never returned. The studio's income barely covered rent and salaries, and payments on the loan we had taken were looming ahead. I didn't put pressure on Lauren, but one evening, while going through the numbers, I honestly told her, "We need to attract more customers, otherwise we won't be able to cover our expenses." She sighed heavily. "I know. So much effort has been put into it, but there are few regular customers. Maybe we should increase advertising, look for more channels. Without an influx of people, nothing will work," I suggested. "Let's try." Lauren smiled weakly, rubbing her eyes tiredly. I could see how tired she was, and I felt sorry for her. We decided to invest in advertising as well. We made a small payment plan with a local radio station for morning announcements, launched targeted advertising on the internet, something like, "Come train in a new comfortable gym in downtown Denver." At the same time, I continued to pay the loan from our common treasury. We agreed that the studio's profits, while modest, would go toward its development rent, utilities, staff salaries, and all the family expenses, and the loan would be on me from my salary as an IT specialist. I even had to take on a small part-time job. I consulted a small cybersecurity startup a couple of evenings a week to balance the balance. Lauren was worried about this, saying, "Sorry that so much has fallen on you." I assured her that it was temporary. "Your hall will get back on its feet. It will become easier." I truly believed that sooner or later the studio would start bringing in, albeit small, income that would ease our financial situation. During those months, many new people came through the studio. One of the most active visitors was a certain Adam, a tall, athletic man of about 35. He began to come almost every day to different workouts, sometimes to morning functional training, sometimes to evening yoga for relaxation. I caught a glimpse of him a couple of times when I stopped by at the end of the day to pick up Lauren. They often exchanged conversations. He would joke at the reception or help her carry heavy boxes with new equipment. At first, I did not pay attention to this. You never know, the man got carried away by fitness, and as for help, many clients helped in a friendly way. Lauren once mentioned Adam. He had his own small business selling sports nutrition, and he offered to supply the studio with protein bars for sale. This made me happy. If such connections appear, it means the business is developing. I remember shaking his hand when he was in the studio one time and Lauren introduced me to him. He was a normal, outgoing guy with a friendly smile. There was nothing in his behavior that was alarming or hinted at future problems. I didn't pay any attention to it. Over time, however, I began to show up at the studio less often. I had more work, and to be honest, I had no energy left after my two jobs. I came home later than usual and often went straight to bed. Lauren also came home late. She said she had a lot to do or stayed late chatting with customers after training. She was constantly tired, but also happy. It seemed to me that despite the financial difficulties, she liked what she did. I was happy for her and tried not to burden her with household chores. I took on the preparation of dinners, laundry. At some point, it was as if we had switched places. Before, she took care of me at home. She would cook dinner, clean, and now the role of breadwinner and keeper of the hearth fell on me. It was not difficult for me, although I admit, at times I just wanted to fall on the couch and not think about anything. Our relationship became cooler during this period, probably due to the accumulated fatigue. We almost never argued. It was as if each of us had our own lives, intersecting only late at night and early in the morning. Sometimes I caught myself not really talking to my wife for days, except about studio matters or bills. But I wrote it off as temporary overload and waited for everything to get better. Megan, Lauren's sister, also visited us often during those months. She lived in a neighboring state, but she came to help with the opening of the studio. Lauren hired her as a second administrator at first, since she could not afford a full-time staff. Megan was a couple of years younger than Lauren, energetic, with a sharp sense of humor. She cheerfully encouraged her sister, but in my presence, she sometimes cautiously asked questions about finances. Are you coping? Maybe we should look for an investor or a partner. Lauren waved it off. Ethan and I are managing. Everything will be fine. I remember then answering Megan. We are at the beginning of the journey. Difficulties are expected. The main thing is that Lauren does what she loves. Megan smiled at me, but somehow sadly. It seemed to me that she did not share her sister's optimism about the future of the studio, but did not want to upset her ahead of time. One evening, about 4 months after the studio opened, an incident occurred that, as is now clear, was how everything began to fall apart. At that time, I did not yet know what effect this would have on my life. That day, I returned from work a little earlier than usual, a rare case when I managed to leave at 6 instead of staying until the night. I planned to stop by the studio to pick up Lauren so that we could have dinner at home. However, on the way she called me herself and, apologizing, said that she would be late. Megan dropped by. We need to discuss some studio business. Don't wait for me. Eat without me, okay? She sounded tired. I didn't mind, although I was a little upset. I wanted to spend the evening together. This didn't happen often anymore. But nothing can be done. Work is work. I arrived home around 7 in the evening. Our small one-story house was in a quiet suburban neighborhood. I parked and saw Megan's car at the curb. So my wife's sister was at our house with Lauren. Apparently, they decided to discuss business at home rather than in the studio. The lights were on in the windows. I entered quietly. It was our custom not to slam the door if someone could rest. Besides, I was curious about what they were discussing there. Usually, in my presence, Lauren and Megan would talk superficially about business matters. I took off my shoes and, walking down the corridor, heard voices from the living room. They did not notice that I had come apparently. They were too engrossed in their conversation. I was about to call out to them, but a phrase that reached me made me freeze. Megan spoke, her voice sounding worried. I don't understand, Lauren. This is mean to Ethan. He's your husband. He trusts you. He helps you with everything he can. How can you do this? I froze, not fully understanding what was being said. I stood in the hallway, out of sight, and couldn't help but listen. Lauren's voice was quiet, strained. Meg, I know. I know it's terrible. I feel guilty every day, but I have no choice. There's always a choice, Megan whispered hotly. You don't have to use your husband's kindness as a financial cushion, only to throw him out when things start to go well. My God, do you hear yourself? My insides went cold. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to comprehend the meaning of what I had heard. Lauren sobbed. Do you think it's easy for me? Do you think I don't suffer? But I don't love him anymore. I try, but I can't. Adam is the one I want to be with. The name Adam rang in my ears. The one from the studio. Megan hissed back. Then you should have told him everything honestly and not taken money from Ethan for your business. This is pure calculation, Lauren. You used him to the fullest. No, Lauren said excitedly. I didn't do it for the money. It's just that I couldn't have done it without Ethan's help. He's a good man. But as a man, I didn't mean to, it just happened. It was you, Megan persisted. You let this happen. You had an affair, yes, an affair, while you were hanging on to your husband to pay the bills. I'm sorry, sister, but it's disgusting. I felt my palms sweat. My heart was pounding so hard they could hear it from the living room. Megan's words confirmed the worst thing. Lauren was having an affair with Adam. And yet Lauren seemed to be planning on continuing to rely on me for support until what? What was she going to do? The answer came the next moment from my wife's lips. I was going to file for divorce when we paid off the studio, Lauren whispered. When I could stand on my own feet. I wanted to pay for everything myself, just take a little time, and then walk away honestly. Leave honestly? After you cheated on your husband with his money? Megan snorted bitterly. Lauren, this is like cheating, only financial. You understand that, right? It's wrong. Maybe. Lauren's voice shook. I guess I'm a terrible person, but I love Adam, and he loves me. We want to be together, It's just that right now. He's in a difficult situation too. He can't support me yet. And the studio is my dream. I couldn't give it up. And Ethan, he's good. He's strong. He'll survive. I thought it would be better for everyone. I'll pay off the loans, the business will get better, then Ethan and I will separate peacefully on good terms. He won't know anything. He'll just think that we've fallen out of love with each other. That happens, it's no one's fault. With each sentence, I felt wave after wave wash over me, first shock, then pain, then anger. My throat tightened. I wanted to rush in there, into the living room, and just ask, "Are you serious, Lauren? Are you doing this to me?" But something held me back. Probably a mixture of horror and disbelief. There was silence in the living room. Then I heard footsteps. It seemed Megan had gone to the window. I barely managed to slip back into the hallway without being seen. My heart was pounding somewhere in my throat. I knew that what I had heard was enough. I couldn't stay any longer. Without thinking, I quietly walked to the front door, without showing myself to them. I carefully turned the handle and stepped outside, closing the door behind me as quietly as possible. It was getting dark outside. I walked to my car on stiff legs. My temples were pounding. Leaning my back against the driver's door, I took a few deep breaths, trying to stop the shaking. The world seemed to have turned upside down in an instant. Everything I had thought was solid and real, my wife's love, our future together, even my own place in this whole fitness studio thing, had all turned out to be fiction. I felt simultaneously humiliated, angry, and completely devastated. Standing in the semi-darkness near the car, I covered my face with my hands. I wanted to scream or cry or both at once, but I held back. Hundreds of thoughts and questions were mixed up in my head. How long has this been going on? Had she really not been with me in spirit for the whole last year, since the very beginning of the idea for the studio? Who was this Adam for her, just a lover, or already a de facto fiancé? Had anyone else heard about this plan? Did everyone around know? And I was the only one left in the cold. And what should I do now? One question was louder than the others. Why? Why couldn't she have been honest right away? Why first use my support, play the role of a loving wife, and then throw me away as soon as the need passed? I had always tried for her. Did I really deserve such treatment? I had no answers. But the moment the initial shock eased a little, I realized the main thing. I couldn't pretend that I didn't know anything anymore. And I couldn't just let her continue with her plan. I started the car and drove away from the house, not really knowing where I was going. I drove along the dark streets without a goal, just so as not to stand there, near the house where my wife, who betrayed me, and her accomplice, my own sister, remained. About 20 minutes later, I pulled into a deserted parking lot outside a supermarket that was closed for the night. I turned off the engine. My own hoarse breath sounded loud in the quiet cabin. I realized that I had barely been breathing until now. I pulled out my phone. My hands were still shaking. I wanted so badly to call Lauren right then, to hear her voice and ask, "Is this really true?" But I resisted. Instead, without really knowing why, I typed a message. "How are you? Has Megan left yet?" And sent it to my wife. It was absurd, but perhaps part of me was trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy, maybe testing her reaction. The answer came 5 minutes later. "Yes, she left. Sorry that the evening didn't work out. I'll go to bed soon too. See you in the morning." Ordinary words, as if nothing had happened. I looked at the screen, feeling the rage boiling up inside me again. Here she was, calmly writing to me like a loving wife, and at this time she was planning her new life without me. I didn't answer. Instead, I slowly and carefully sorted through everything I'd heard. Lauren wants to wait until we pay off the studio debts and then go to her Adam. So, in fact, she's only with me for the money. She doesn't care what happens to me after. He's strong, he'll survive. She thinks she's acting almost nobly. She's not leaving me now, when she's in debt and dependent on me, but will wait until she doesn't need anything from me. And then goodbye, Ethan, live as you please. These thoughts made it hard to breathe again. But soon the anger cooled down, replaced by some kind of cold calm. I suddenly felt acutely. Throwing a tantrum or making a speech now was too easy. Yes, I wanted to break down, come home and confront her with everything. But what would that change? She would either deny it or, on the contrary, would admit with relief, yes, it was all true, since I knew. But then what? A scandal, tears, maybe promises, I won't do it again. But I already heard her say that she didn't love me. No, I won't would help. It would have been much more logical to do otherwise. Since she had calculated everything, no debts, we can get a divorce. It means it's time for me to start counting and planning. Only my plan will be in my interests. That night, sitting in my car in an empty parking lot, I made a decision. I would not tell Lauren any of this now. Instead, I would prepare myself. I would do whatever it took to protect myself financially, legally, emotionally. And then, when I was ready, I would file for divorce myself, without even waiting for her to get back on her feet. Let her plans go to hell. That thought made me feel a little better. At least it felt like I had some control over something. Of course, the pain was still there. It felt like a crater-sized void had formed inside me. But determination filled its edges. I drove home late at night, without speaking to my wife, who was probably fast asleep in our bed by then, unaware that her secret had been revealed. The night was restless. I barely slept, tossing and turning, going to the living room couch, then back to the bedroom. Lauren was asleep with her back to me, and I lay staring at the ceiling, feeling the icy gap between us. By morning, I had finally fallen into a restless sleep, from which I was awakened by the alarm. Waking up was excruciating physically. I felt broken, and mentally even worse. But I had a show to play, to pretend that everything was normal. Lauren was in the bathroom, brushing her teeth when I walked in, and gave me a quick, routine smile through the mirror. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound normal. "Hi," she replied, with toothpaste foam on her lip, the usual marital routine. I put the coffee on in the kitchen. Lauren soon came out, already in a tracksuit, getting ready for her morning workout. She always left before me. The studio opened at 7. "You came home late last night," she said, pouring herself a cup. I shrugged. It was hard to fall asleep, so I went out to get some fresh air. It was a half-truth. I really had been getting some fresh air in the car that night. She nodded understandingly. "Yes, it was hot, stuffy at night. I passed out right away. I didn't even hear you lie down." "It happens," was all I answered. I wanted to look at her, to look for signs of deception on her face, to detect changes. But she looked as usual, slightly sleepy, preoccupied with thoughts about her affairs. I didn't notice any particular sense of betrayal as I had read in books. Just my wife, unaware that I knew about her plans. "Will you be home tonight?" she asked, zipping up her gym bag. Usually, that was a question that meant whether we should cook dinner together or with each other. I thought for a second. Every conversation between us now had a double meaning for me. "Yeah, probably," I answered. "I'm busy with work, probably going to stay up late again." "Maybe," I said evasively, and I added, trying to sound casual, "if you have things to do, don't worry about me. I'll take care of it." She glanced at me briefly, either surprised or simply noting my words. "Okay," she said peacefully and kissed me on the cheek goodbye. I had to restrain myself from pulling away from her kiss. She slipped out the door, and I froze in the kitchen, listening to the silence of the empty house. I couldn't help but remember how just a couple of years ago our morning goodbyes were different. Lauren would hug me goodbye. We could joke over breakfast or make plans for the evening. Now, all that was left was forced politeness. The thought left a bitter feeling in my soul. As soon as her car drove away, I allowed myself to sit down and cover my face with my hands. My heart was pounding. Keeping my emotions in check in front of her was harder than I thought. But I managed. The first step had been taken. She didn't suspect anything. I sipped my cold coffee, trying to collect my thoughts. The plan that had matured in me during the night required a cool head. The most pressing points popped into my head. 1. Finance. I need to protect my money. If Lauren decided to leave me after the payments, she was probably going to take everything she could with her. Maybe she was slowly saving up the money from the studio for her own accounts, or counting on half of the joint assets in the divorce. I had to check our accounts, loans, and all obligations. First of all, the loan for the studio. It was registered in my name, which meant that, according to the documents, I was responsible for it. If we divorced right now, would this debt be divided in half or what? And if later, when it was paid off? It would be unfair if I paid it off, and she walked away with the business, leaving me with nothing. So, it might even be more profitable not to allow the debt to be fully repaid before the divorce, so that at least half of the responsibility would fall on her. This thought seems cynical, but reasonable. 2. Documents and evidence. I need to collect all the financial documents, the loan agreement, bank statements, studio lease agreements, everything that concerns our joint money and her business. It would be a good idea to copy them in case she hides or deletes something later. Also, proof of her intentions. I realized that from a legal point of view, the fact of betrayal or deception may not matter in Colorado. Divorce is no fault, meaning the reason does not directly affect the division of property. But knowledge is power. If I have confirmation of her plan, maybe I can tilt the situation in my favor. At least morally, I will be confident that I am right. 3. Lawyer. You can't do without a lawyer. I've never encountered anything like this before, but I intuitively understood. I need a good specialist in divorce cases. He will tell me how best to act so that I don't end up with nothing. So I need to look for and choose a lawyer, perhaps get a consultation first. There were other points in my head, too, for example, housing, things, even our 2 cats. But that's later. First things first. Finances, documents, legal basis. I decided to do it today. Taking unpaid leave, or at least asking for time off to do everything I needed to do. Luckily, I had a lot of trust built up at work. I rarely took days off. I called my boss, citing personal circumstances that required urgent matters. He didn't go into details, wished me luck, and said no problem. Take a couple of days if you need to. Having relieved myself of the burden of my work obligations, I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop. The first thing I did was check our joint accounts. We had one common savings account and one current account for expenses. In addition, each of us had our own separate account, but we rarely used them. More often, we put everything into a common pot. There were about $15,000 in the savings account, our savings. We put aside little by little. The current account usually did not have much, 2 or 3,000, for monthly expenses. I decided to immediately secure at least part of it. I opened a new account in my name via online banking and transferred half of my savings to it, about 7.5 thousand. I considered this amount to be my fair share, and if they suddenly ask why I transferred it, I will say that it is in case of unforeseen situations like I want to invest it. I left the rest so as not to arouse suspicion by abruptly zeroing out the account. I decided not to touch the current account for now. There is not much there anyway. Next, the loan. I asked the bank for a statement. As of today, the remaining debt was about 65,000. Dear God, this figure was a burden on my shoulders. I still have to pay for years $1,200 a month. I earned most of this money with my own labor because the studio was hardly making a profit. I also checked to see if Lauren had taken out any new loans without my knowledge. We recently applied for a business card for her studio. The limit was small, about 5,000, but there was no need for extra debts. Judging by the statement, she had already managed to spend about 3,000 on it, probably on equipment and other small things. Who will end up owing this debt? Formally, on her business, but in fact, we paid for everything with joint money. As I studied the numbers, emotions took a back seat to cold analysis. I had a task, to minimize the damage. I had been deceived, yes. But now the main thing is not to let myself be deceived even more. I decided to temporarily stop pouring money into her studio. Previously, I transferred sums to her account every month to cover rent or salaries if there was not enough. Now stop. Let her try to cover it from her income or look for other ways. This may raise questions, but I can refer to the need to tighten my belt or some unforeseen expenses. The next step is collecting documents. I realized that we had a lot of papers at home, a copy of the marriage certificate, house documents, car documents, tax returns, a loan agreement, a studio lease agreement. I decided to digitize all of this, scan or photograph it to keep copies for myself, just in case I suddenly lost access to something. For example, the studio lease agreement, it was in Lauren's name, and a copy was kept in her office, but I saw a draft in our documents. I found a folder labeled Lauren's Studio in a cabinet with papers. Yes, there were bills, a lease agreement, some acts inside. I quickly went through it all, making copies on my phone. I tried to put it back carefully, as it was, so that she would not notice the interference. I did the same with our marriage contract, or rather, the lack of one. We got married without a marriage contract, which meant that everything we had acquired together was subject to division in half, as far as I knew. This worked against me. No matter how much money was invested in her business, it was still joint money, and in a divorce she could lay claim to what was left in our assets, and I could lay claim to a part of her studio, theoretically. But if the studio is unprofitable, then I would only get the debts. In general, the picture is not cheerful. I realized that I couldn't handle all this complexity on my own. I needed professional help. Putting the papers aside, I started looking for a lawyer. I typed something like "Best Divorce Lawyer Denver Reviews" into the search. A lot of options came up. I read a couple of articles on how to choose a lawyer and looked at ratings. The names meant nothing to me, so I had to rely on reviews. In the end, I chose a female lawyer in her 40s with solid experience. According to clients' descriptions, she was tough and meticulous, which is exactly what I needed now. I called her work number, cleared my throat, my heart was pounding, as if I was doing something reprehensible. The secretary scheduled a consultation for me the next morning. Well, the first day of my secret plan was approaching lunchtime. I had managed to do a lot. I had prepared the financial ground and found a lawyer. The hardest part remained to survive this day, meet my wife in the evening, and not give myself away. I felt like an actor on the stage, walking on the thinnest ice. The ice was cracking, but I hoped to hold on, for the sake of my own goal. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy chest. An important day was ahead. I was going to a meeting with a lawyer. Lauren had already left early for her first class, so I was home alone. I changed into formal pants and a shirt for some reason. I wanted to look respectable in front of the lawyer, like before an exam. I arrived at the lawyer's office half an hour before the appointed time and sat in the car for a while, putting my thoughts in order. In the glove compartment, there was a folder with copies of the documents I had collected. I opened it and leafed through it. Marriage certificate, account statements, loan agreement, list of main assets, house, car and liabilities, loans, studio. Everything I could remember. I jotted down the essence of the problem on a separate piece of paper, but crossed it out and wrote it again, not knowing how to formulate it. My wife is planning a divorce after I pay off her debts. It came out dry and strange. In the end, I decided that I would just tell her verbally. Finally, I went up to the office. The lawyer's name was Sarah Miller. She was short, trim, and had a sharp gaze. In the office, she invited me to sit down at an oak desk. The atmosphere was strict and businesslike. Diplomas and certificates hung on the wall, and weighty case files stood in neat rows on the shelves. Everything suggested that I was in good hands. "Ethan, how can I help you?" she began with a professional smile. My mouth went dry. I stuttered slightly and said, "I am thinking about divorcing my wife, and I need advice on how best to do this." "Well, you've come to the right place," Sarah nodded. "Tell me a little about your situation." I felt a lump in my throat. How to explain everything without spilling my emotions? I decided to lay out the facts. We have been married for 6 years. No children. For the last year, I have been financing the opening of my wife's business, a fitness studio. A large loan was taken out in my name, and everything was done with this money. The studio is not yet profitable, there are still debts. And, I swallowed, I recently found out that my wife is going to— the word cheating stuck, but I squeezed out, "Leave me as soon as the studio gets on its feet and the debts are paid off." The lawyer raised her eyebrows slightly. "Did you find out from her herself?" "No, I overheard the conversation by chance. I admitted. She has another man, and she's sort of planning to divorce me not now, but later, so that in the meantime I'll continue to pay. Sarah pressed her lips together for a second, then asked neutrally, I understand. Are you sure that everything is exactly like this? Yes, I nodded. I have no direct evidence, only what I heard. But I trust what I heard. Okay, she leaned forward slightly. First of all, I'm sorry you're in this situation. It's unpleasant, to say the least, but I'm here to help you figure out what to do. Am I right in assuming you want to start the divorce process first, ahead of her? True. I want to file for divorce myself before she carries out her plan, and I want to protect my interests, especially financial ones, so that she doesn't get more than she should, given the circumstances. Okay, Sarah made a note in her notebook. Let's start with the general. Colorado, like many states, has a no-fault divorce policy. This means that the court doesn't really care why the marriage breaks up because of infidelity or just disagreements. The division of property is based on fairness, but does not punish moral actions. That is, even if your wife behaved badly, you shouldn't count on the court punishing her for it. I was not pleased to hear this, although I expected something like this. So her betrayal and prudence will not affect anything. On the fact of divorce itself, no. On the division of property, also not directly. However, indirectly, some points can be taken into account. For example, if there were large expenses from the family budget on her affair on the side, you can try to present it as embezzlement of common property for other purposes. But this is difficult to prove and usually has little effect. Also, in Colorado, property is divided equally or on a principle close to equal if there is no marriage contract, the lawyer explained. I nodded. We didn't have a marriage contract. So, she continued, our main focus will be on your financial protection, not on the moral assessment of her actions. Your goal is to minimize losses, am I right? Yes, I said firmly. I don't want to pay her a cent more than necessary. Frankly, I'd like to get back what I've invested in her business, but I know that's legally unlikely. Let's get this straight. You have a house, a car, was it all acquired during the marriage? She asked, leafing through my papers. We bought the house together with a mortgage. We both pay, but I pay more, I answered. There are about 20 years left to pay the mortgage. We bought it recently. We only have one car. We bought it with my money before the wedding. So the car is your premarital property, unless you re-registered it, Sarah noted. That's a plus. It's not divisible. The house is a joint asset. It will be divided. Loans. Well, this big one for business is registered in your name, but in fact it was spent on your wife's business. This is a controversial point. Technically, it's a joint debt, since it was taken out during the marriage, but the court may take into account what it was spent on. It may be possible to argue that since the money went to her business, she should pay it back. But there are no guarantees. The court may decide to divide the debt in half during the divorce. I see, I said gloomily. Next, is the studio registered in her name? Asked the lawyer. Yes, the sole proprietorship is in her name, I confirmed. Then it is also an asset, although it is currently unprofitable. It will also need to be taken into account. Either assess the value of the business at the time of divorce, which may turn out to be zero or negative value due to debts, or agree that she keeps the business for herself along with the debts, and you do not lay claim to it. I like the second option, I smiled joylessly. Let him take his brainchild along with all the loans. Sarah nodded. We can try to write this into the agreement. If she agrees, of course. But considering that the business is her dream, she might prefer to keep it, even at the cost of debts. I think so, I agreed. Now an important point, alimony and maintenance. There are no children, so the issue of child support is out of the question. But there is also the concept of spousal support, or simply put, alimony for a spouse. If she has a low income and you have a high one, she can theoretically demand maintenance after the divorce for some time to get back on her feet. I hadn't thought this through. Everything inside me started to boil. Do you mean to say that she can, having left me, also demand money from me for her life? That's unfair. The lawyer calmly spread her hands. Laws are not about justice in each specific case, but about general rules. She can try. Another thing is that the marriage is not very long, 6 years, and she has income potential. Perhaps the court will limit or not assign her maintenance, especially if we prove that her business is capable of providing for her. I really wouldn't want that, I frowned. To pay her even after the divorce. I understand. We will work to minimize or avoid this. In the end, we can try to use the fact of her behavior as leverage in negotiations, like, let's part peacefully, otherwise we can raise topics that are unpleasant for you. Blackmail or what? I asked. We won't call it blackmail, just an argument behind closed doors. In court, I repeat, it will have little effect, but in private, so that she doesn't start a war, you can make it clear that some ugly details are known. If she is a conscientious person or afraid of publicity, she will be more accommodating. I remembered Lauren's face that night, crying and saying she was tormented by guilt. Yes, she has a conscience, albeit a strange one. Perhaps she doesn't want a scandal. Yes, I understand, I answered the lawyer. That's probably how it will be. We discussed a few more details. Sarah asked if I planned where to live if we separated. Our house can't be divided between two people. I didn't want to move out now, so as not to give up the initiative, but living together mentally after announcing my intentions is quite a test. Sarah advised, until I officially filed for divorce, it is better to maintain the status quo, so that she does not suspect. And after the filing, we can either divide the house or temporarily live under the same roof, or one of us can move out. But it is important not to abandon the house completely, so that it does not seem like I have abandoned it. We will decide closer to the matter. Finally, we outlined a plan of action. I'm collecting a couple more financial papers that were missing. I will stop funding her business with my own funds immediately. In the coming weeks, we will prepare a statement of claim for divorce and outline our terms for the division of property. Once everything is ready, we file. After filing, the mandatory 91-day waiting period in Colorado begins. During this time, we either come to an agreement or go to court. Before filing, no sudden movements, so that the wife does not destroy the documents prematurely or take the money somewhere. I confirmed that I understood. That was how we ended the meeting. Sarah said that she would send a contract for services and an invoice for prepayment. The price was steep. A good lawyer is not cheap. You will have to shell out a couple of thousand at once. But there is no choice. Much larger sums are at stake. As I left the office, two feelings were battling inside me. The first was bitterness that all this was happening to me at all, that I had to so cynically divide my life into assets and liabilities. The second was a strange relief that I had a plan and professional support. I was not alone in the face of adversity. At least there was clarity on how to proceed. On the way home, I stopped at a copy center and printed out the emails with the extracts that the lawyer asked me to send. I also bought a flash drive to keep copies of important files in one place, not just in the cloud. What if a war really starts? It's better to be prepared. The day was drawing to a close. I had to put on the mask of a loving, unsuspecting husband again. On the way, I stopped at the supermarket and bought food for dinner, deciding to cook something neutral. Choosing products in the vegetable section, thinking about sauces, all this seemed unreal when your head was filled with betrayal. But the daily routine even helped to distract myself. I was making chicken pasta when Lauren came home. She looked tired as ever, her hair disheveled, her eyes bloodshot. I was surprised. Exercise usually refreshed her. "Hi," I said quietly. "How was your day?" She brushed a strand of hair off her forehead. "Hi, I'm so tired. So many clients this morning, then tax paperwork. Plus, Megan went back home today. I drove her to the airport." I had to fight to keep a straight face. Megan had left. After that night, it seemed the sisters had decided to take a break. In fact, it was better that way. It was less likely that they would discuss their plot in front of me again. "I see," I replied, stirring the sauce. "Too bad I didn't say goodbye to her." Lauren just nodded and, taking off her sneakers, sat down on a chair. "What's that smell? Are you cooking?" she asked with a hint of surprise. I cooked quite often, but apparently this was unexpected for her. Maybe she was gnawing at the guilt, which is why she was surprised by my attention. "Well, the pasta will be ready in 10 minutes," I replied. She sat quietly, her chin in her hands. It was hard to look at her, as if the words that she had betrayed me were written on her forehead in a running line. But I blinked away the images and tried to act normal. Dinner passed almost in silence, a few words about the taste of the sauce and the weather. Lauren seemed lost in her own thoughts. At one point she said, "Thank you for making this. I'm sorry I'm not feeling well today." I just nodded. "It's okay." After dinner, she went straight to bed, didn't even take a shower. She was completely exhausted. I cleared the table and thought, this is how we live, like neighbors. No warmth, no conversations. And she probably thinks that it's all because of fatigue and routine, not suspecting that I know the real reason for the coldness between us. Before going to bed, I wrote a short letter to the lawyer, attaching scans of the documents we had discussed, and thanked him for the meeting. Then I lay down on the couch in the living room, saying to myself that I didn't want to disturb my tired wife's sleep with my possible walking at night. In reality, I simply couldn't bring myself to lie down next to her and pretend to be asleep, fighting the desire to tell her everything. Better to do it separately. A few days after meeting with the lawyer, I decided to contact Megan. Lauren's sister had moved away, and according to his wife, they had not parted on the best of terms. I knew that Megan was the only person who knew the whole truth, other than the people involved in this drama. And although I felt awkward dragging her in, I felt the need to talk. At least to say that I was aware, and to hear confirmation, maybe some other details that I had missed. I waited until Saturday, Lauren's day off, when she usually spent half the day at the studio, teaching several group classes in a row. In the morning, after kissing her on the cheek and wishing her a good day, I got into my car and drove to a park on the other side of town. There, having parked in a quiet place, I dialed Megan's number, which I had. She didn't answer right away after several rings. Her voice sounded wary. "Ethan? Hello." She was clearly surprised to receive a call from me. "Hi, Megan." I tried to sound calm. "Sorry to bother you. Do you have a minute to talk?" Yeah, sure." She hesitated. "Did something happen? Is everything okay?" I couldn't help but smile bitterly. "Not quite. And you know what I mean." In the silence that followed, I heard Megan let out a quiet breath. "So, you know. Yes, I overheard your conversation with Lauren a few days ago. The whole thing." Megan cursed. "Damn. So you were home then. I was afraid of this." "Did you guess what I could hear?" I asked, surprised. "When I walked out of the house that day and your car was gone, and then Lauren told me you were gone, I started thinking. I thought I heard the door, but she didn't notice. I was hoping I was imagining things. I guess not." "Ethan, I'm so sorry," she blurted out sincerely. "I'm sorry you found out this way, and I'm sorry any of this happened." I felt a lump in my throat. "It's not your fault. On the contrary, thank you for trying to bring her to her senses." Megan chuckled bitterly. "It didn't really work out. After that conversation I left, we had a fight. I couldn't convince her." "Tell me, please," I asked quietly. "How long has this been going on? There's a lot I don't know. I need to understand." She hesitated, but then, apparently having made up her mind, she spoke. "I found out not so long ago. A couple of months, maybe. I noticed that Lauren was distancing herself from you and that she was talking to some guy. I didn't know who he was back then. Then I realized that it was the Adam she mentioned. She didn't admit it. She kept saying that she was just a friend with similar interests. But I saw how she texted someone at night, how she smiled at the phone. You were always at work or tired at home, and she was on the phone. That made me wary. I listened, clutching my mobile phone tighter. I imagined them sitting there in the evenings, me tiredly washing dishes or working on my laptop, and she at that time writing love messages to another. This picture made my chest ache. And then Megan continued. "One day, it was, I think, about a month and a half ago, she confessed to me. We drank wine then. She was in a nervous mood, and she said, like so-and-so, she and Adam have a relationship, they fell in love. Of course, I gasped. I asked, and then what? She then said that she herself did not know that everything was complicated. She had a debt, obligations to you, this business, and Adam. By the way, Adam, as far as I understand, is not married, but things are not simple for him. Either he has debts or his business is also tight financially. In general, he can't support her now financially. They apparently decided to wait until Lauren gets stronger. I just exhaled. The picture became clearer with disgusting details. I felt so disgusted then, Megan admitted. I told her straight out, "You're doing something nasty. You're betraying Ethan." And she cried, said that she loved Adam, but not you, and that she had wanted to end everything for a long time, but... Her sister's voice trembled with anger or pain. But you see, she couldn't leave you, because then her dream would collapse. It was as if she convinced herself that she was doing everything for some noble purpose, like she didn't want to leave you in debt. But in fact, it turns out the opposite. She wanted to leave you in debt, and the business for herself. I was silent. Yes, that's exactly how it looked. Megan continued. After that incident, we argued a lot. I tried to reason with her. Should she leave honestly now, or, on the contrary, come to her senses and leave Adam? But she didn't listen to anyone. In the end, we almost stopped talking for a while. And then the other day, when I came to help around the studio again, I brought up the topic, thinking maybe she had come to her senses. And she said to me, "No, everything is decided, it just takes time." Well, that's when I exploded. You heard everything else. Yes, I quietly confirmed. There was silence. I heard Megan sniffle on the other end of the line. Honestly, I feel bad for both of you, but especially for you, Ethan. You're a good person. You're not her brother, but over the years you've become like one to me. And to know that she does this, I have no words. I suddenly felt moisture in my eyes. Megan's words touched me apparently. I really needed support from at least someone. Thank you, I exhaled. Really, thank you for telling it like it is, and for not supporting her in this. I would never support such a nasty thing, she said firmly. I understand, she's my sister, I love her, but she's wrong. And I told her so directly. By the way, she's not even angry with me, she just kind of distanced herself. She's ashamed, I think. I thought about it. Shame may torment Lauren, but it doesn't stop her. Ethan, what are you going to do now? Megan asked cautiously, as if she was afraid to give advice. I ran my hand over my face. I'm already doing it. I'm collecting documents, hired a lawyer. I want to file for divorce first, without waiting for their whole operation. I see, she responded. That's probably right. I won't make a scene, I continued. I'll just set the stage and confront her with the facts when I'm ready. Megan chuckled softly. Knowing you, you will do just that calmly and sensibly, but probably inside you are not at all calm right now. These simple words suddenly tore the armor off my soul. I felt my chin tremble treacherously. It hurts so much, Meg, I managed to say. It hurts so bad. I know, she whispered. I'm sorry. It's not your fault, I repeated, swallowing. Anyway, thanks for talking to me. I needed to hear that. Of course. If you need anything, any help, she began. There's one thing, I interrupted, gathering my courage. Could you, if necessary, confirm what you know? Well, for example, if she suddenly starts denying reality. Not necessarily in court, but simply if she. Megan didn't answer right away, but she answered firmly. Yes, if necessary, I will confirm that I knew about her plans. I hope it won't go to court, but keep in mind that you can count on me. Thank you, I said sincerely. Finally, we said goodbye. I promised to keep her informed. She wished me strength. When I hung up, I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes. The conversation with Megan left a heavy aftertaste, but also gave me determination. Now I knew for sure. This was not a dream, not a mistake. Everything was exactly as I heard. My wife fell out of love with me, fell in love with someone else, and is using me. Period. That night, when I got home, I looked at Lauren differently for the first time. She was sitting at her laptop on the couch, typing something, maybe posting an ad for the studio or checking the class schedule. I stopped in the doorway of the living room and just stared for a few seconds. How unfamiliar she seemed to me, even though I knew every curve of her face, every mole. There was emptiness inside. I guess that's what happens when a verdict is passed, and there's no longer any doubt or hope for acquittal. She looked up. "What's wrong?" I came to. "Nothing, everything's fine." And I went into the kitchen, leaving her perplexed. In the following days, I consistently followed the outlined plan. I transferred the rest of my salary to a new account and changed the settings so that all my salary would go there from now on. Previously, we put money in a common account, but now I said that I wanted to save separately for an investment project. Lauren just shrugged her shoulders. Maybe she was even happy with this. She sees less of my money, feels less guilty. I don't know. I also took care of joint credit cards. We had a couple of joint cards for big purchases. The balance on them was almost zero, but theoretically Lauren could use them. I called the bank and canceled them, saying we didn't need them. I opened a personal card in my name instead. I did all this quietly without advertising it. Once or twice I dropped by the studio unannounced, saying I was stopping by on my way to visit. Lauren showed no suspicion. She was just happy or pretended to be happy. Adam never showed up in my presence during these moments, although I kept an eye out for him. Maybe he was hiding. But no, it was more of a coincidence. Once I noticed a bouquet of flowers on the reception desk. I casually asked, "Does someone give you flowers?" Lauren was slightly embarrassed. "Yes, one client thanked me for the lessons." I didn't say anything, but I internally noted that it was unlikely that a simple client would express himself like that. However, I can't know for sure. In any case, I didn't start a showdown, to be honest. I didn't care anymore. One night, about a week after my conversation with Megan, the episode I had been dreading happened. Lauren was asleep next to me. Well, she fell asleep, and I lay awake. Her phone was on the nightstand, and the screen lit up several times with incoming messages. She kept the phone on silent, but she left the screen flashing. In the dark room, it was noticeable. Maybe it was reckless, but I took her phone. My heart was pounding in my throat. What if she wakes up? But she didn't even move. I quietly walked out into the hallway with it. I knew the access code. We had exchanged passwords for trust a long time ago, and she apparently hadn't bothered to change them. My fingers were shaking as I entered the 4 digits. The screen unlocked. I went straight to the messages. The latest were from Adam. That's how he was written. My eyes ran over the lines of their correspondence. First, I saw the most recent, from this evening. "I miss you. How are you?" he wrote. "I miss you too. I'm just really tired. I'm falling asleep on the go. I would come to you now, but I can't. When will we see each other?" "I don't know. I'll try to get away this week, okay?" "Okay, darling. Kisses." I closed my eyes, trying to hold back the panic. There it was, in black and white. They were continuing their affair, looking for a meeting. It turns out she isn't living with him yet. They see each other somewhere secretly. I scrolled up, trying not to remember too much. Sweet confessions, a couple of stickers with hearts. My heart sank with each phrase. Here Lauren writes, "I'm so sorry it's dragging on, but there's no other way. Just a little more patience." I didn't finish reading. The meaning was clear. Almost nothing about me, only once she mentioned, "He doesn't suspect anything." I gritted my teeth. Having closed the correspondence, I went to the photos. There was also confirmation several selfies of Lauren with Adam, apparently taken in the studio when no one was there, or somewhere in the park. They were hugging in the photo, smiling. She looked happy, not as tired and gloomy as with me at home. I realized that was enough for today and hurried to close everything, erasing the history of the latest applications so that she would not notice what I had been crawling with. I returned the phone to the nightstand and went back to bed. I did not close my eyes again that night. But at least I now had enough evidence for myself, and if necessary, I took screenshots on my phone. I do not know if this will be useful, but let it be. In the morning, looking at my pale face in the mirror, I thought, how low have I fallen that I'm rummaging through someone else's phone? But then I stopped myself. Someone else's. It's my wife's phone, and she has a secret life on the side. So who betrayed whom? Justice is on my side, no matter how you look at it. A week later, all the preparations were basically complete. I gave the lawyer all the documents I found. I made a list of property and debts. Sarah, my lawyer, prepared a draft divorce agreement. It proposed that everyone takes what is theirs. I keep the house, the car, and Lauren keeps the studio and the loan associated with it. We formally divide the joint accounts in half. In fact, almost everything has already been spent on payments. There are no savings except for what has already been distributed. We did not specify anything about spousal support. If she touches on it, we will resist. In fact, the offer was more beneficial to me than to her. The house is an asset with prospects. The studio is a liability for now. But she gets to keep the business of her dreams, which is emotionally important, and I get to keep the home, which is also logical. It would seem reasonable. Finally, one Monday toward the end of the month, I went to the county courthouse and filed for divorce. At the desk, I handed the clerk our papers, who examined them dispassionately, stamped them, and filed the case. She gave me a receipt and a copy, marked the start date, and it was officially underway. I felt a chill run down my spine. I had taken the step that would determine my entire life. The law required that the 91 days begin when Lauren received official notice. A process server could have done that, but I insisted on handing them over myself. I wanted to look her in the eye at that moment. All day after the serve, my hands were shaking from adrenaline. It was an irreversible step. There was no way back. But I didn't regret it. I was too badly hurt to keep up the appearance of a marriage. That evening at home, I prepared for the second act, handing her the copies. I was waiting for her in the kitchen when I heard the key turn in the lock. Lauren walked in, holding a sports bag over her shoulder, and when she saw me, the corners of her lips smiled, tiredly but welcomingly. "Hello, you're early today." I was rarely home before her, really. I watched her silently as she put her bag down by the wall. Inside, everything was seething, but on the outside, I tried to appear calm. On the table in front of me lay an envelope with documents. I held my palm on it. She felt the tension. Did something happen? "We need to talk," I said hoarsely. My throat instantly went dry. This was the moment of truth. Lauren became wary. She silently sat down on the chair opposite, taking off her jacket. I couldn't help but notice. She was nervously fiddling with a zipper. Her fingers were shaking. Perhaps her intuition was already telling her something bad. "What should we talk about?" she asked, trying to smile. I removed my hand from the envelope and moved it towards her. "About that." She glanced at the envelope. The words, "Denver County Court, Dissolution of Marriage," or something like that were printed on the front. Lauren frowned, not understanding at first. Then she carefully pulled the papers out and glanced at them. Her face was rapidly turning pale. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. For a minute, she simply read, flipping through the pages, making sure she was seeing correctly. Then she looked up at me, her eyes a mixture of horror and incomprehension. "What? What does this mean?" she whispered at last. "I think it's clear," I answered quietly. "I filed for divorce." Lauren turned even whiter. "But why? Where?" She hesitated, the lump in her throat preventing her from speaking. I looked straight into her eyes. The silence lasted for a few seconds. Then I said quietly, "I know everything, Lauren." She blinked. "What's all this? What are you talking about?" I felt my teeth clench. It was harder to stay alert than I thought. "I know about you and Adam, and about your plan to wait for the debts to be paid and go to him." The words hung in the air like a clap of thunder in our small kitchen. Lauren froze, her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide. She stared at me as if she were hoping to read a refutation on my face. "Who?" she barely managed to squeeze out. Who told you this? You yourself, I answered. Or rather, I accidentally overheard you talking about it with Megan that evening. She closed her mouth and covered it with her hand. It seemed like she was breaking out in a cold sweat. I saw a strand of hair stuck to her temple. Oh my God, she breathed out. Did you hear everything? Enough, I answered harshly. Lauren suddenly burst into tears. I didn't expect tears or hysterics. I thought she would deny it. But she covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. God, Ethan. I looked at her and did not recognize my once proud, confident wife. In front of me was a frightened girl who had just lost her footing. Then it's true, I said dully. Everything I heard is true. She removed her hands from her face, the mascara running down her cheeks. It's not quite like that, she moaned. I wanted, not like that. Not like that, I asked bitterly. Not like that to deceive me? Not like that to leave? Lauren sobbed. It's my fault, I know. I was going to tell you honestly, just not now. I felt a flash of anger. Of course, not now. And when all the debts are closed on me, right? Very convenient, Lauren. She shook her head. It sounds terrible, I know. But I had no choice. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to hurt me? I blurted out louder than I should have. Are you serious? You laughed in my face for years, let me think that we had a family, while you slept with another man and made plans to use me and then throw me away. She choked on her sobs. I thought it would be better this way. I wanted to leave when I could pay my own bills, so you wouldn't be left with my debts. This phrase drove me crazy. With your debts, I stood up, feeling my knees shaking. You already left me with them. The loan for the studio is on me. Who pays it? Me. All the bills are on me. Do you have any idea how much your dream cost me? I know. She cried. I know, it's terrible. I wanted to return everything honestly. The studio would start making money, and I would return your money. Nonsense. I couldn't help but grin. You lied to yourself that you could pay off the debt I was carrying. You couldn't even pay the rent for the studio without me. And yet you found time and energy for romances. Lauren covered her face again, her body shaking with tears. I'm sorry. Please, I'm sorry. I have no excuse. I stood opposite, breathing heavily. There was relief and bitterness in the rage. Relief because the truth had finally been revealed. Bitterness because everything had been completely destroyed. There's nothing left to forgive, I said more quietly. I'm not going to sort things out or give you any chances. It's over, Lauren. She lowered her hands and looked pleadingly. Ethan, I understand. But maybe we could just talk calmly, without a trial. Why get a divorce right away? Maybe we could separate, think. There was panic in her voice. Of course, she didn't expect me to cut it off so abruptly. You should have spoken calmly a year ago, I replied. It's too late now. She shook her head, gulping air. I'll explain everything. We really did grow apart. It's not because of you, it's just... The feelings went away. I didn't understand at first. Then Adam appeared. I didn't want to, honestly, I didn't want to fall in love. It just happened. I'm a coward. I should have confessed to you, but I was afraid to suddenly, abruptly ruin everything. Business, debts. You were so kind to me, Enough. I raised my palm. No more. I don't need your excuses. I've heard enough. You fell in love with someone else, okay? It happens. But why did you have to make a fool out of me and a sponsor at the same time? That's what's disgusting to me. You chose the meanest way to leave. Lauren cringed, tears streaming down her cheeks. I know, it's my fault. We were silent for a few minutes. She was quietly crying. I stood there, feeling how the anger gradually cooled, leaving only emptiness. My mission was accomplished. I had laid my cards on the table. But this did not make me happy. In front of me sat a person who had once been close to me, who was now almost a stranger to me. And yet, strangely, I felt sorry for her. It was a pity to see such a breakdown. Ethan, she whispered suddenly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. What now? Do you really want a divorce? Yes, I said firmly. I don't want to be with you after this, and you wanted it yourself, as far as I understand. She silently lowered her gaze. Then she asked, You hired a lawyer, right? Yes. Oh my God, she exhaled. It's gone so far. Lauren, I said wearily, what did you expect? That I, having learned of your deception, would say, It's okay, continue living with me, I'll wait until it's convenient for you to leave. She shook her head. No, of course not. I just didn't think you'd find out like this. Well, as they say, you can't hide an awl in a sack. She sobbed quietly again. Then she crumpled the papers in front of her copies of the lawsuit and asked, It says here about the division of property. Yes, I nodded. In general terms, I propose that the house stays with me, the studio with you. I take on the mortgage, you take on the business loan. I keep the car, it's mine anyway. We'll split the money in the joint accounts, if there's anything left. And no one owes anyone anything anymore. Lauren listened, biting her lip. She seemed to be trying to comprehend. But what about? She hesitated. My duty to you. What debt? I squinted. Well, for the studio. You invested so much. I chuckled. Consider it a gift. I don't intend to demand it back. Just take everything into your own hands now. Pay these loans yourself. She nodded slowly. She sat for a few moments, staring blankly at the table. Then she said quietly, Ethan, I know it's too late to ask, but I'm really sorry. I was terrible. You deserved better. Her voice broke. You were a wonderful husband. I'm the one who ruined everything. I was silent. I guess I wanted to hear this confession, but now it hasn't changed much. She shrugged, looking at the floor. Well, now it's probably better to stay under the same roof. I understood what she was getting at. I think it's better for us to live separately, yes. Should I leave? She asked quietly. I guess that would be logical, I said. Lauren nodded, tears starting to flow again. I can go to my friends for now, or... She took a deep breath. I know I have to leave. It was me who betrayed you in our home. At these words, her voice broke completely, and she covered her face, sobbing bitterly. For some reason, this phrase about home and betrayal cut me. I felt that I was also on the verge of tears, but I forced myself to be firm. When will you be able to pack up and leave? I asked with difficulty. Can I? Now, she said, sobbing. I'll take the essentials, the rest later, if it makes you feel better. As you wish, I shrugged, trying to appear indifferent. In fact, the scene broke my heart. No matter how angry I was, seeing the person I loved crying and packing her things to leave was unbearable. I turned away, pretending to look out the window, while she rushed around the room, getting a bag out of the closet. I heard her throwing clothes in at random, sniffling. After a while, Lauren walked past me towards the exit. She had a duffel bag and a package in her hands. She stopped at the door. I turned to her. I'll call you about papers, details, she said barely audibly. And, if possible, I'll come by later to collect the rest of my things. Okay, I nodded. Lauren put her bags down for a second and timidly stepped towards me. Can I hug you goodbye? I recoiled instinctively, as if she were threatening. I don't think so. Her face contorted in pain, but she only nodded. I understand. I'm sorry. She picked up her bag and opened the door. She turned around on the threshold. Ethan, I watched in silence. I wish you, for you to be happy, really, forgive me, for everything. Her voice barely reached us. I didn't answer. I just watched her go out and quietly close the door behind her. When the lock clicked, silence fell over the house. I felt my legs give way and sank right to the floor in the hallway. A dull pain was spreading in my chest. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Instead, pictures from the past appeared before my eyes: our dance at the wedding, a trip to the sea together, New Year's together by the fireplace. We were happy once. How could everything turn out like this? This thought made me cry even harder, sobbing uncontrollably like a child. The first few days after Lauren left were a blur. I called in sick from work, citing a migraine and general malaise, which was, in fact, what I had suffered, mental anguish turning into physical weakness. I sat for hours in the quiet of the empty house, trying to process the changes. Lauren's things were still everywhere. Her mug on the shelf, her shampoo in the shower, a wedding photo in the living room. It all seemed like a ghost of the past now. One night, I gathered all her little things into one room. I didn't throw them out, of course. I just folded them so they wouldn't be an eyesore. I put the photos we had together in a box. There was a moment when I came across an old note she had left me on our anniversary. "I love you more than life itself. Yours, Lauren." I collapsed on the floor, clutching that piece of paper, and cried until I was completely exhausted. I didn't tell anyone what had happened except for the most necessary people. I called my lawyer, Sarah, and told her that I had handed over the documents and that Lauren had moved out. Sarah praised my determination and said that she would wait for a response from Lauren's side. She should either sign or hire a lawyer to respond. I briefly relayed my wife's reaction. The lawyer asked me to let her know if Lauren contacted me with legal questions and otherwise to try to communicate through lawyers. A couple of days after the breakup, Lauren's mother called me. Apparently, her daughter had told her. The mother-in-law was upset, but she was polite. She said that she was sorry that it had happened, that she thought the decision to divorce was right, given the circumstances. I felt relieved. Apparently, Lauren had confessed to her honestly, without embellishment. Lauren's mother even apologized to me quietly. "Sorry about our girl. She did something stupid." I didn't know what to say. I just thanked her for understanding. We agreed that I wouldn't mind if she met Lauren at our house when she came to get her things, if necessary. That was the end of the conversation. It was hard to tell my parents. They lived in another state, and I told them over video that we were getting a divorce. I didn't go into details about the betrayal. I just said that we had different views and decided to break up. My mother cried and said that she had always loved Lauren as a daughter. I had to assure them that everything was for the best. My father muttered, "Well, hang in there, son." And that was that. We had few mutual acquaintances, married couples with whom we occasionally dined. Lauren herself would probably tell them later if she thought it necessary. I wasn't going to notify anyone specifically. Perhaps the only person I shared more or less fully with was Megan. We kept in touch via text messages. She wanted to know how I was holding up. When I said I had done everything, she replied, "I'm proud of your strength. It's the right thing to do." She said she had spoken to her sister after our breakup. Lauren had called her in tears. According to Megan, Lauren had admitted her guilt to her completely and said that she hated herself for the way she treated me. Megan relayed these words to me. Apparently, she wanted me to know that her sister was remorseful. But that doesn't make me feel any better. Regrets don't change the past. A week later, I had to meet Lauren in person. She was coming to pick up the rest of her things. I asked my friend from work, Calvin, to be there so that I wouldn't be alone. Lauren's mother and another friend came with her. We greeted each other stiffly, exchanged a few polite phrases. Lauren tried not to meet my eyes. I noticed that she looked unwell, haggard, with shadows under her eyes. But this didn't make me happy, rather it caused a bitter feeling. No one won in this story, we both lost. We packed our things quickly. Lauren's mother hugged me unexpectedly. When we said goodbye, I was even taken aback. She whispered, "Take care, boy." Lauren stood by the car, holding a box, and looked at the ground. I didn't say anything to her. I just closed the trunk door when everything was loaded and walked away. She also said nothing. That's how we said goodbye. In the following weeks, the legal part of the process began. Lauren hired a lawyer, though more for the paperwork than for the fight. A certain Mr. Johnson, a rather soft-spoken lawyer, contacted me. He offered to meet to discuss the terms and sign a settlement agreement so as not to drag it out. I wanted to get all the formalities done quickly, so I agreed. We gathered at their office, me, my lawyer Sarah, Lauren, and her representative. It was the first time my wife and I had sat at the same table since the breakup. It was a strange feeling. We were close, but like strangers, lawyers talking among us, papers spread out. Lauren looked at the table almost the entire time and was silent, answering only when she was asked about a specific point. Our proposal for the division of property, which Sarah had prepared, was generally accepted. Lauren's lawyer only clarified a couple of points. For example, he raised the issue that at the time of division, the house had a small market value, and half of this value could be due to Lauren. But Sarah countered that the house also had a large mortgage debt, and we were offering to free Lauren from business debts. In the end, we agreed that no one would pay compensation for the house to anyone. I keep the house. She has no claim. We also agreed on the business loan. Lauren officially acknowledges it as hers as part of the division. Her lawyer only insisted that I remove my name from the lease agreement for the premises. This is reasonable, I agreed. Why do I need extra obligations now? As for other things, furniture, appliances, we decided not to divide them individually. She has already taken what she wanted from her personal belongings. I am keeping the rest for myself. We also discussed our cats, two male cats that we got a couple of years ago. Lauren wanted to take one for herself and leave the other for me. I agreed it was sad to divide the pets, but I couldn't give them both away either. I had become attached. So each of us got a cat. Finally, the issue of maintenance. Neither side brought it up. Apparently, Lauren had decided not to ask for anything, as she had promised. Sarah asked point blank, "Do we include the spousal maintenance clause?" Lauren's attorney looked at her client, who shook her head. "No, we don't." I breathed a sigh of relief. At the end of the meeting, we signed an agreement on the division of property, which was then to be approved by the court along with a divorce decision. It turned out to be a virtually peaceful divorce by mutual consent if you don't count the background. As we were leaving the building, Lauren and I stood next to each other for a moment in the parking lot while the lawyers discussed something behind us. For the first time, she looked me straight in the face. "Thank you, that everything went smoothly." I just nodded. She added quietly, "I really appreciate that you acted nobly." I smiled bitterly. "I don't know how noble this is. I just want to end it all." "I understand," she sighed. "If you need anything, documents or anything else, you know where to find me." "Okay," I answered briefly. Politeness and aloofness were all that remained between us. She hesitated, as if she wanted to say something, but changed her mind. She said goodbye and went to the car. I watched her for a couple of seconds, then turned to my car. The era of living together was officially coming to an end. All that was left was to wait for the court's decision in the required 90 days. These months dragged on painfully long. Formally, we had already resolved everything, but according to the documents, we were still listed as married, just living separately. During this time, I was slowly getting used to being alone. I was not fired from work. On the contrary, my boss, having learned about my problems, went to meet me and loaded me as much as he could. Work became my salvation. Immersing myself in codes, security checks, I was distracted from my personal life. However, in the evenings, the empty house again cast a shadow over my soul. I began to return home later and later, so as to spend less time in silence. I turned on the TV for background noise, although I did not watch it. At first, sleeping pills helped me sleep. Without them, I tossed and turned, replaying old scenes in my head. An image often appeared before my eyes, Lauren and Adam laughing together in a photo or whispering behind my back. These thoughts hurt, but gradually, oddly enough, I began to tire of my own pain. At some point, the tears dried up. A certain emptiness formed inside. I realized that I was probably going through a stage of acceptance. Everything happened. The past cannot be returned. I must live on. Towards the end of that period, there was a formal, brief court hearing. Sarah and I were there. Lauren was on video. The judge asked a few standard questions, making sure the agreement was mutual and fair. I saw Lauren on the screen. She looked calm, giving monosyllabic answers, trying not to look at the camera. Ironically, I didn't want to look at her image. She seemed too formal and alien at that moment. We ended our marriage almost emotionlessly, like a business deal. And then the judge made his decision. In a few days, we would be handed a divorce certificate. As I walked out of the courthouse with the final divorce papers, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. 6 years of my marriage had ended with one stamp on a piece of paper. Having officially remained a bachelor, I expected to feel relief. And indeed, on the day the court-certified divorce papers arrived in the mail, I exhaled a long, long exhalation, as if throwing off a heavy backpack. But at the same time, there was a gaping emptiness in my soul. 6 years of living with a man, and now he is gone completely, as if a part of me had been amputated. Sometimes in everyday life, I still caught myself thinking about her. Seeing her favorite dish on the menu, I wanted to tell her about it. Or, waking up in the morning, out of habit, I expected to hear the sound of the shower and her singing behind the wall. Then I remembered that this was no longer there, and a lump rose in my throat. In order not to go crazy, I decided to see a psychologist. I came across a good specialist, a woman about my age, who seemed to have experience working with people who had gone through betrayal and divorce. At first, I doubted whether it was worth airing dirty laundry in public in front of a stranger, but already at the second session I felt relief. I told her everything from beginning to end, even the most bitter moments. She did not judge either Lauren or me, she simply helped me understand. Your reactions are completely natural, she said. Anger, pain, a feeling of betrayal, this is normal. It is important to allow yourself to live through these emotions and gradually let go. We talked about the fact that it was not my fault that it happened. I understood this in my head, but my heart was looking for reasons, reproaching myself for perhaps not paying enough attention to my wife, being too immersed in work, and not noticing the warning signs. The psychologist helped me see that responsibility for my choice lies with Lauren, and her actions are the result of her decisions and not my shortcomings. After a few sessions, I began to feel a little better about the past. No, the pain didn't go away right away, but I stopped replaying scenes of betrayal in my head every day. The psychologist suggested a technique, writing a diary. Write down everything you feel on paper or in a file. It structures your thoughts, she advised. However, I was already practically keeping records of events and thoughts. It helped me to record this story as if I were an observer from the outside. Probably, it was these notes that formed the basis of my current story. Once during a session, the conversation turned to forgiveness. I jumped up. Forgive her, after that. But the psychologist clarified, forgiveness is needed not for her, but for me, so that I myself do not carry the burden of anger forever. It was a difficult moment. I was not ready to say, I forgive. It seemed like a betrayal of myself. But over time, I realized, holding a grudge is like holding on to a hot coal, burning only your palm. Lauren moved on as far as I knew. She continued to run the studio, and probably her affair with Adam was developing. And I was stuck in anger. And in order to move on, I had to let go. I didn't succeed right away, but I gradually came to this. One morning, waking up, I suddenly realized that for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel a heavy heart. Yes, I no longer have a family, I'm alone again, but that doesn't mean that life is over. I've survived the worst, and I'm still here. My friends helped me. That same Calvin would drag me out of work once a week to rock climbing training. We used to go together sometimes, but in the whirlwind of recent years, I abandoned this hobby. He insisted, let's go, warm up, get some adrenaline. The first couple of times I went without much enthusiasm, but fresh impressions and physical activity did their job. When I returned home, I would collapse without strength, but my head was freer from heavy thoughts. Another colleague invited me to play on the console and have a beer, also a small thing, but still communication. Gradually, I came out of my shell. I even started joking at work again, instead of walking around like a gloomy cloud. People around me, of course, knew about my divorce. The office radio was full of it. But they tactfully did not pester me with questions. They simply supported me neutrally, and that was good. By that time, about 6 months had passed since the day I found out. The wound had not yet completely healed, but the sharp pains were less frequent. On the advice of a psychologist, I made a list of things that I had long wanted to do but had been putting off. Among them were some very small and some larger ones. Rereading my favorite childhood novel, going to a concert, finally going to the lake to fish, and starting to learn Spanish. It's funny, but one of the items was try volunteering. I don't even remember when and why this thought came to me. I think I once told Lauren that it would be nice to take part in a charity run and then forgot. Now, filling my life with something new, I thought, why not? I started looking for opportunities to help somewhere. In Denver, as everywhere, there are plenty of organizations that need volunteers. I figured out what I could do. I have specific skills computers, networks. For example, I could teach the elderly or children the basics of computer literacy, or help as an IT specialist for some non-profit organization with security settings. I shared this idea with a psychologist, and she approved. Great, volunteering often gives a sense of significance and fills life with meaning. Well, that sounded like exactly what I needed to find new meaning. My first volunteer adventure began on a Saturday morning at a small community center at the city library. I had contacted the coordinator of the Computer ABC for All program in advance. They taught the basics of working with a computer to senior citizens and anyone else who wanted to. My skills were just right there. The coordinator, a smiling guy named Russell, was immediately happy to see a new volunteer and invited me to join. I admit, on the way there I was nervous, like before a first date. A completely new experience, teaching strangers and even those who are far from technology. Thoughts were spinning in my head. What if I can't explain properly? What if I can't find a common language with pensioners? But as soon as I entered the bright hall with rows of computers, the excitement subsided. I was greeted warmly. About 10 people had gathered, mostly elderly ladies and a couple of men, the oldest of whom was almost 80, as he proudly said. Many did not know how to use a PC at all. They came to learn at least how to write letters to their grandchildren by email. I introduced myself. My name is Ethan, and I'd be happy to help you get comfortable with the technology. To my surprise, the audience applauded. Apparently, they appreciated any step of help. I felt a warm feeling inside from their simple gratitude even before I started. The first lesson went wonderfully. We learned the most basic things: how to turn on the computer, use the mouse, type text. One lady, Mrs. Rogers, could not learn to double-click. She laughed embarrassedly that her old hands did not obey. I carefully took her hand in mine and showed her the movement, and she succeeded. The other students even clapped with joy at her success. Mrs. Rogers laughed embarrassedly and even kissed me on the cheek, exclaiming, "Thank you, son. You are a real teacher. I have not felt so needed and useful for a long time." After class, I stayed behind to help dismantle the equipment. Russell, the coordinator, clapped me on the shoulder. "Great job, man. You should have seen their faces. You're like a magician to them." I smiled. "Thank you. I didn't expect it to go over so well." He then invited me to come regularly. "We'd love to see you on a regular basis, at least once a week." Without thinking twice, I agreed. Inside, I felt like it was right. When I got home that day, I found myself humming under my breath for the first time in a long time. Volunteering really did help push the dark thoughts away. I loved sharing the knowledge and seeing the results right away, the students' eyes glowing with enthusiasm. In the following months, I expanded my volunteer activities. In addition to computer courses, I participated in city events a couple of times. For example, I helped collect food for a charity fund, sorted things for homeless people. These were simple tasks, sometimes routine, but after them my soul was filled with warmth. I met other volunteers very different: students, pensioners, housewives, office workers like me. Everyone was united by the desire to do at least something good. In their company, I stopped feeling like a person with a broken life. I was just Ethan, who knows how to set up computers and is not too lazy to go help on his day off. I remember one evening, returning from a volunteer meeting, I caught myself thinking about my divorce not once all day. I was laughing with new acquaintances. We were discussing plans to hold a master class on internet safety for schoolchildren, and old wounds seemed to be erased in these moments. Of course, it was impossible to forget everything completely. Sometimes, especially in the silence of the night, memories would come flooding back. But I learned to switch off. I would get up, for example, and do some physical exercises or read a book until the bad thoughts subsided. I noticed that my cat had become an important therapist. Whenever I felt sad, he would jump on my lap and purr, demanding affection. Taking care of him also brought me back to reality. The animal did not allow me to completely wallow in self-pity. About a year after those events, I suddenly realized I am calm, really calm. I live a measured life. Work, the gym in the evenings, meetings with friends, volunteering, or going out into nature on weekends. A bachelor's regime, but quite cozy. The house gradually acquired a different character. I did some repairs, repainted the bedroom where Lauren and I lived in a different color, changed the curtains, and bought new dishes. These little things, perhaps, symbolized the renewal of my life. One day at lunch, Calvin, who was not known for his tact, blurted out, "Listen, man, you've been really shining lately. What, have you found yourself a woman? Admit it." I was embarrassed and shook my head. "No, what are you saying? It's just that everything has finally returned to normal." He smiled. "Well, that's good. I was worried. I thought you'd remain a gloomy guy." I thought about his words. Was I glowing? Perhaps. There really was a sense of quiet joy inside me. I appreciated the simple things: a leisurely morning coffee, a beautiful sunset from my living room window, a colleague's joke, a new episode of my favorite podcast. Before, in the hustle and bustle, I hadn't paid attention to them, but now I savored them, as if life had regained its flavor. One evening, Megan called me. We hadn't spoken in months. She was busy with her life. I was busy with mine. She asked if she could talk. I was feeding the cat dinner and chuckled. "Sure, I can always talk now. The single life is free." She laughed warmly and said, "It's nice to hear a joke in your voice. Are you okay, huh?" I answered honestly, "Yes, I really am." Megan told me she had news. She was getting married next year. I congratulated her. She invited me to the wedding, said I would be a welcome guest. I thanked her, although I'm not sure if I'll go. Celebrations are stressing me out right now. At the end of the conversation, she hesitated. "Listen, I know you probably don't care, but just in case. Anyway, Lauren and Adam also recently got married." I was silent for a few seconds, realizing what I'd heard. Megan quickly, "Sorry, maybe I shouldn't have said it. I just thought it would be better for you to find out from me than by accident." I inhaled and exhaled. What did I feel? Yes, a slight prick somewhere deep down, an echo of old pain. But surprisingly, there was no outburst of emotion. "Thank you for telling me," I answered calmly. "I wish her well." And indeed, these words came to me without sarcasm. Apparently, I really managed to let go of the offense. Megan sighed with relief. "You are a kind person, Ethan. I hope fate will reward you now." We said goodbye warmly, remaining friends. After the call, I sat in silence for a while. There it was, the final confirmation that the chapter was over. My ex-wife had married the very man she had essentially started this whole thing for. Oh well, if they were happy, so be it. I no longer felt like I was part of this story. After some time, I felt ready to let new communication into my life. I didn't set myself the goal of urgently finding a new love, no. Rather, I was simply open to opportunities. It so happened that at one of the volunteer events, I met a girl named Hannah. She helped organize a charity run and asked me to set up their laptop, which was glitching during a presentation. I quickly coped with it, and we started talking. Hannah turned out to be my age, worked as a teacher, and volunteered in her free time. She had a friendly, smiling face and a calm voice. That day, we talked for about 20 minutes while we waited for the race to start, discovering that we had a lot in common. For the first time in a long time, I found myself genuinely interested in talking to a woman, and it didn't cause me the pain of memories. As we parted ways, she said, "It would be great to run into each other at some other events." I nodded with a smile, "Sure." And after a pause, I decided, maybe we could have coffee sometime. Hannah looked a little embarrassed, but answered, "Why not?" That was my first date after the divorce. I was nervous as a teenager. We met in a small coffee shop downtown. I told her honestly that I had recently divorced and was therefore a little awkward in such meetings. She smiled understandingly. It's okay, we'll be awkward together. I'm not exactly an ace at dating either. The evening passed surprisingly easily. We talked about books, about work, about funny stories from our volunteer projects. I suddenly noticed that I was laughing heartily, without any bitterness. It was calm and safe with Hannah. Of course, it was too early to talk about any feelings, and it was unknown whether the acquaintance would grow into something more. But the very fact that I could relax again next to another woman meant a lot to me. After coffee, we took a short walk around the evening city. As we said goodbye, I thanked her. I really had a good time today. Hannah replied, "Me too. Let's do it again sometime," and I happily agreed. As we parted ways, I walked to the car and caught myself noticing that the world around me seemed a little brighter. The streetlights were warmer, the air was fresher, and there was a pleasant excitement inside, not anxious, but joyful. I won't overdramatize. I didn't have an instant new love or anything like that. And I wasn't trying to rush into a serious relationship right away. But I kept in touch with Hannah. We went to the cinema with her friends a couple of times, and together we participated in a park cleanup. These were friendly get-togethers that could possibly become something more over time. Or maybe not, life will show. The main thing is that I realized that I was able to trust again and enjoy communication without fearing a stab in the back every second. A psychologist once asked me at a regular meeting, "Can you imagine yourself in a new relationship now without fear?" I thought about it and answered, "Probably yes. I'm still cautious, but I'm not giving up on the idea of being with someone." It was a big step forward. Just a few months ago, I swore that I would never let anyone close. And now, please, I'm open. With caution, of course, but open. Meanwhile, life went on as usual. My work was going uphill. Apparently, the focus on the project and the new energy did their job. I was promoted to a leading specialist. My salary was increased. Ironically, my financial situation became much better without the other half that was draining my resources. I paid off part of the mortgage early, dealt with some old debts. I fixed everything in the house. It really became mine, lived in personally to my taste. I remember the first time I celebrated my birthday when I was officially single. I was 33. I had a small party at home for friends, something Lauren and I had done before, but this time I was doing it on my own. The guys from work came over, a few people from the volunteer team, even a neighbor dropped by. We were grilling something in the yard, laughing and playing board games, and I suddenly caught myself thinking, this is it, a quiet, good life. Without pathos, without drama, but also without the feeling that something was missing. Late in the evening after the guests left, I sat on the porch with a mug of tea, looked at the stars, and thought about the year I had lived. It was the hardest in my life, but it led me to the most important thing, to myself. Before, I lived for someone else in many ways. For Lauren, for her dream, for the ideas of how it should be. Now I have learned to live for myself, not selfishly, but consciously. And paradoxically, this has made me even more useful to others after all. Volunteering, new projects. All this came from my own desire, and not from an imposed sense of duty. A few more months passed. Life settled into its usual routine, and the past was remembered less and less. One day in mid-spring, I received a beautiful envelope in the mail with a glossy postcard inside. It was an invitation to Megan and her fiancé's wedding. The celebration was planned for the summer in the girl's hometown, a couple of hours' drive from Denver. I sat at the kitchen table, fiddling with the invitation that read in ornate script, "Megan and Thomas invite." At the bottom, Megan had handwritten, "Ethan, I really want to see you. I'd love it if you came. You're part of the family. Meg." Part of the family. These words echoed warmly in my soul. Megan really was kind to me, but the decision to go was not an easy one. I knew Lauren would be there, probably as a bridesmaid or just a sister, and with her new husband. Would we be able to calmly be in the same room? Would I ruin the celebration with my presence, or, on the contrary, with my inconvenience? I called Megan to thank her for the invitation and to discuss the details. She immediately asked, "Are you probably hesitant about coming because of Lauren?" "A little," I admitted. Megan sighed. "I understand. My sister, by the way, isn't sure if you'll come either. She said she'd understand if you can't. But Ethan, I really want you to come. You mean a lot to me, and Tom asked me to bring you. He's heard how much you've helped me." I smiled. "I'm not sure I did that much." "Well, of course," she objected. "If it weren't for you, I don't know how long Lauren would have lived in a lie. I know it all hurts, but you did the right thing and the noble thing, and I'll be happy to see you at my party, really." Her voice was so sincere that the doubts in my soul melted away. I decided I will go. "Okay, Meg, you have convinced me," I said. A joyful cry was heard in the receiver. "Hooray! Just listen, if anything happens, I will seat you and Lauren at different ends of the room, don't worry." I laughed. "Everything will be fine, don't worry." After hanging up the phone, I felt a slight chill excitement mixed with anticipation. This would be a kind of test. Would I be able to maintain the balance I had worked so hard to achieve while looking at my ex-wife and her new husband? Deep down, I believed that I could. At least, there was nothing painful tugging at my insides anymore when I thought about them as a couple. At the same time, I thought it would be nice to come with someone else. Firstly, to feel more confident, and secondly, to avoid unnecessary pitying glances like, "Oh, my ex-husband came alone." It's not that I depended much on other people's opinions, but extra comfort wouldn't hurt. I invited Hannah to join me. We were already quite friendly by that point, and she liked the idea of a short trip together. I honestly warned her that my ex-wife would be there, which might be awkward. Hannah just shrugged. "I'll be with you, we'll get through it." And so the wedding day arrived. Hannah and I left in the morning, dressed appropriately. I in a blue suit, she in a soft green dress. On the way, I told her a little about Megan's family, the setting, and tried to prepare myself. Hannah listened calmly, sometimes joking, trying to distract me. I was very grateful to her. It was worth inviting her. When we arrived at the venue, it was a country restaurant with a garden. The registration had not yet begun. The guests were gathering on the lawn. The first to greet us was the bride herself. Megan, in a delicate lace dress, looked dazzlingly happy. She rushed to hug me. "You've arrived. I'm so happy." "Of course, how could I miss you?" I answered, smiling shyly. We moved away a little, and Megan looked at my companion with interest. I suddenly realized, this is my good friend Hannah. The girls smiled at each other and shook hands. "It's very nice," Megan said. "I'm glad that Ethan has such a charming escort." Hannah thanked me with flattery. Megan took me aside a little under the pretext of showing me a seat at our table. As she walked, she quietly asked, "How are you?" "Are you nervous?" I shrugged. "A little, but it's okay." She squeezed my hand lightly. "Everything will be fine. If anything happens, I'm here." Our table was not filled with immediate family, but rather friends. Judging by the seating arrangements, Lauren and her husband were sitting far away, perhaps on the other side of the room. I appreciated Megan's thoughtfulness. The ceremony began, and I was distracted by the beauty of the moment. Megan and Tom, so joyful, exchanging vows under an arch of flowers. A small orchestra played a gentle melody. Guests quietly chatted and smiled. Someone close to me even wiped away a tear of joy. I caught myself genuinely happy for the newlyweds without any bitterness or envy. I sincerely smiled, looking at them. Nearby, Hannah quietly whispered, "How sweet, isn't it?" "Yes," I nodded. Somewhere in the second row, I noticed Lauren. She was wearing a soft pink dress, with her hair done, standing and filming the event on her phone, clearly touched for her sister. Next to her was a tall, dark-haired man, probably Adam, although I saw him only a few times. Inside, there was no skipping a beat. I simply registered the fact. Here they are. After the official part, the guests moved to the banquet hall. I didn't particularly look for a meeting with Lauren, but at some point we did make eye contact. She must have seen me at the ceremony because now she didn't look surprised, just a little tense. I smiled briefly and nodded. Lauren responded with a slight, strained smile, and everyone returned to their conversation. The table turned out to be fun. The neighbor on the left was an old family friend, a funny guy who was constantly joking. Hannah and I quickly joined in the conversation. I even relaxed so much that I completely stopped looking for my ex. When the first dances began, Hannah pulled me onto the floor. We laughed, trying to imitate the moves they showed us. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Lauren and Adam dancing nearby. They looked happy, and for some reason, that made me happy too. Perhaps for the first time, I looked at them without a hint of malice, but simply as two people who had found each other. After a while, when Hannah went to powder her nose and I went out onto the terrace to take a break from the noise, Lauren came up to me. I noticed her out of the corner of my eye and turned around. We found ourselves alone in a secluded corner of the terrace where there was almost no one. "Hello, Ethan," she said softly. "Hello, Lauren," I responded calmly. She looked a little nervous. She was clutching a clutch in her hands, her eyes darting around. I, to my own surprise, remained completely unperturbed, probably because everything that needed to be said had long been said. "I'm glad you came," she began. "It means a lot to Megan." "I'm glad to be here too," I answered sincerely. "The wedding is wonderful." "Yes," she tried to smile. "Meg is so happy." There was a pause. Then Lauren said quietly, "Thank you for being okay with my presence. I know it might be awkward." "It's okay," I assured him. "We're adults, after all." She nodded, looking down. "I saw that you were not alone." "Yes, I came with a friend," I answered. "Her name is Hannah." "She's sweet," Lauren said. "I'm happy for you." I didn't answer, I just smiled politely. Lauren sighed slightly. "You know, I've wanted to tell you something for a long time." I looked questioningly. She continued. "Then, at our last meeting, I was too confused, and then there was no chance. I just wanted to ask for forgiveness again. I know you probably heard it from me 100 times that night, but still." She looked up at me, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I was mean and unfair to you. You don't have to answer for it. I just wanted you to know that I'm very sorry." I felt a little awkward. I didn't expect this at a fun event. But looking her straight in the face, I answered softly, "It's okay, Lauren. I let go of this situation a long time ago. Let the past stay in the past." She nodded, quickly wiping the corners of her eyes to keep the mascara from running. "You are very kind. Thank you." We stood there for another second in silence. Then she asked quietly, "How are you in general? Are you happy?" I thought for a moment and nodded. "Yes, I think so. Everything is fine with me now." "I'm glad," she said sincerely. At that moment, Adam came out to the terrace doors, looking around in search of her. "Oh, there you are," he said, coming over and putting his arm around Lauren's shoulders, slightly possessively. His gaze slid over me warily. Lauren quickly introduced. "Adam, this is Ethan, my—" She hesitated, not knowing how to refer to me. "Her ex-husband," I said calmly, holding out my hand. "Hello." Adam shook my hand, obviously feeling a little awkward. "Hi. We've I think we've crossed paths a couple of times. Good to see you." "Likewise," I answered diplomatically. It was obvious that he was having a hard time finding the right words. He probably felt guilty too, although we had no personal scores to settle. There was another pause. I decided to break it. "Well, I wish you both all the best." Adam nodded, muttering a thank you. Lauren quietly added, "And to you too, Ethan. Happiness." We exchanged one last glance, this time calm, even warm to some extent, and parted ways. They returned to the hall, and I stood for another minute, looking at the sunset sky. Silence and peace reigned in my chest. No anger, no pain, only the feeling that the final point had been made. Hannah found me there on the terrace and asked worriedly, "Are you okay? I saw you talking to her." I turned to my companion, smiling heartily. "Everything is great. Shall we go dancing?" She raised her eyebrows in surprise at the abrupt change of topic, but then laughed. Let's go. The drive back to Denver was quiet and pleasant. Hannah dozed off in the passenger seat, exhausted from dancing and impressions. I drove along the evening highway, looking at her and thinking about how strangely and surprisingly life puts everything in its place. Just yesterday, I was worried about meeting the past, and today I am calmly returning home, feeling that there is no longer any burden of this very past. The phrase was spinning in my head, the end is always the beginning of something new. That difficult end that I experienced opened a new chapter for me, full not of tragedy, but of the most ordinary, kind things. Hannah stirred and opened her eyes. "Are we close yet?" she asked sleepily. "Almost, my dear," I responded quietly. She smiled and closed her eyes again. That sweetheart just came out of my mouth. I hadn't called her that before. Maybe we had become closer after the day we had spent together. In any case, I felt a warm feeling towards this girl, grateful for her support. I don't know where our acquaintance will lead us, time will tell, but I couldn't wait to see how my life would develop further. A couple of hours later, I dropped Hannah off at her house. As she was saying goodbye, she suddenly touched my hand softly and said, "You know, you're a very brave and kind person, Ethan. Watching the way you interacted with them today, it was impressive." I was embarrassed. "Thank you. Without you, I might not have decided." She shook her head. "I would dare. You have a big soul." We were silent for a while in the quiet of the evening. Then she gave me a light hug. I hugged her back. It was more than a friendly gesture, more like the beginning of something new. And this time I wasn't afraid. "Shall we call tomorrow?" I asked, letting her go. "Of course," Hannah smiled. When I arrived home, I was met by a hungry cat, outraged by my long absence. At first, my pet was clearly looking for the second cat, which Lauren had taken in around the house. But then he got used to being alone and now demands attention only from me. Having fed him, I sank into an armchair in the living room with a cup of tea. My soul was infinitely light. I mentally replayed my entire path from that ill-fated evening to today and felt proud. Yes, pride in myself. I held out. I did not break down, did not become completely embittered, did not lose faith in people. I was able not only to protect myself, but also to overcome the insult. I remembered my first conversation with a psychologist when I was seething with anger and said that I would never forgive or forget. Well, it's probably impossible to forget completely after all. It's part of my biography, an important lesson. But it turned out to be possible to forgive. Not in one day, not in a month, but the scar healed, and there's no need to press on it with pain. I wonder what I would be like now if I had done something differently then. If I had turned a blind eye to what she had heard, silently waiting for her to leave me on her terms. Most likely, I would have been trampled by a feeling of humiliation. I would have lost my self-respect. Or if I had made a scene, lost my temper, perhaps everything would have ended much dirtier, and who knows how it would have affected my psyche. No, the path I chose, no matter how cold and calculating it seemed at first, turned out to be the right one. I was true to myself in it. I pulled out my laptop and opened the file where I had been writing down my thoughts and events, all this time a kind of diary that the psychologist recommended keeping. I scrolled up. The first lines were dated last year, shortly after those events. My first desperate, "My name is Ethan. My life seemed ordinary." How much the tone of these notes had changed since then. From anxious and angry to calm and even grateful. Yes, perhaps it was gratitude that I felt towards fate now. It sounds strange to be grateful for divorce and betrayal, but I am grateful for the lesson. It made me more mature, wiser, taught me to appreciate what I had not noticed before, and not to waste myself in vain. I finished my tea, wrote a few lines about today in my diary, about how everything ended harmoniously, and closed the laptop. The cat immediately jumped onto my lap, purring. I stroked him and said quietly, "Well, my friend, now everything will be fine with us." He just purred louder in response. I smiled. A new week lay ahead: work, a meeting with Hannah, another lesson in the computer lab. A normal, calm, happy life. And that was more than enough for me. I finished my journal the following week, rereading the entire journey I had taken from beginning to end. Each page was a reminder of how I had grown from a confused, depressed person to a stronger, calmer person, step by step. In the last entry, I summed it up. It's been over a year since the moment that turned my life upside down. At the time, it seemed to me that the world was collapsing and there would be no more happiness. But now, looking back, I understand. That collapse was the beginning of my renewal. I learned to stand up for myself, to separate truth from illusions. I saw how many good people are around, ready to support. I discovered that I can give my time and knowledge to others and get joy from it. I opened my heart again to new feelings, although I thought that I would never be able to trust. If someone asked me if I wanted to go back and live differently without this pain and drama, what would I say? Probably not. As strange as it may sound, I am grateful to my fate for the test. It hardened me, removed the lies from my life, and gave me a chance to start over, more consciously. Now I have many roads ahead of me, and I don't know where each one will lead. But I am calm. I know that I can handle it. After all, I have found support within myself and found true friends nearby. I am no longer alone, even when I am alone. I have myself, and that means a lot. With this, I conclude my diary. It is time to move on, without looking back at the past. It has left its lessons, and I leave it in my memory without bitterness. Forward to new horizons. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.